We're all human, and sometimes when it becomes too challenging, you get a little bit discouraged. But that's what happens when you try to innovate, and especially these new innovations with AI. Cross our fingers, and we hope that it will make a change, really.
Welcome to Women Talk Tech, the podcast for business professionals committed to advancing women in the tech sector.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Women Talk Tech. I'm your host, Wiese, and today I have Nathalie Myara on the show. Nathalie is the CEO and co-founder of Eduplan Solutions, which is a tech company in the education and health space. And she's going to tell us a little bit about that organization and why she started it. I met Nathalie at the Women in IT Summit, where she was a panelist and did a brilliant talk on what we need to be thinking about as we move forward with AI, how that relates to people with disabilities, and how we bring everyone together in a more progressive way online, regardless of our abilities. And so I thought she would be a wonderful guest today to come on and talk about Eduplan Solutions and what she's doing there, because there's some truly innovative things going on. And I'm thrilled to have her on the show today. Welcome, Nathalie.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be here today.
Tell us a little bit about Eduplan Solutions. What's it all about? How did you start it? Who's it for?
Okay. So how did I start Eduplan? Basically, I was lecturing. I'm still lecturing in university, and I was working on different projects, research and development projects. And one of my biggest projects was IEPs. IEPs, which we use for students that have disabilities, wherein we have to design a certain program for each student that have a disability in schools. And I was very concerned with the efficiency of the IEPs, and also how do we assess the IEP, how efficient it is. And
just for our listeners, explain what an IEP, spell that out for us and explain what that is.
Individualized educational program.
Right.
So what does it mean is that you design a little program for a student that has a certain disability. And because he has this disability, so we're going to identify certain goals that are really individual and personalized for that student. And then we're going to determine the means to reach those goals. Like, how are we going to help the student, and what will the student also do to be able to reach his own goals? So it's a process, but it's also a certain document where we kind of put out together all the plan, and then also we have to review that plan, implement it, and review it, and so on. So it's a very interactive kind of document, if I want to call it a document, but it's a whole process. There's a whole team. Everybody who's giving services to these students are concerned, and they're supposed to be meeting together with the parent, with the student, to determine what are the goals and those means. So here, especially in Canada and Quebec, I was very concerned of the efficiencies of these plans. And in university, I learned this new methodology on how to do research and develop certain products in the field of education. And I was like, wow, this is something that should be used to try to discover, well, how should we design almost perfect IEPs? And so I took this adventure, and I started the 2 phases. That was actually my thesis. That's how I did my PhD. And at one point, after doing the 2 phases, where I had to identify all the problems, all the different people that would be using an IEP, I had to design also certain matrix where we determine what will be the function of an ideal IEP. So that was my thesis. So once you're done with those 2 phases, then the last phase is really, it's creation. Create a prototype and test it, and then you validate it. And at that point, I'm like, okay, we have to figure this out. So I started creating different things, different workshops, tools for teachers, for parents, for students. But the ideal was to create a software which will integrate all these things that we need to mobilize to be able to really help that student get a proper IEP, and also to satisfy the needs of the different professionals, because they also have needs. It takes time, they need the right tools and all these things. So that's when we started working with different groups of people, and then the next step was, oh, hey, I think we can integrate some artificial intelligence. So I had to speak with an expert in AI and see, is there something there? Can we? This is how it works, the process, and that got me to learn more and more about all of this, all the tech world, and that's how I got into it. And I finally opened this company called Eduplan Solutions, where we create these kind of softwares.
So you do software, and it is for students, or is it for teachers who are building the plan?
So you have a version where it could be the student who's self-directing his IEP. But most cases right now, it's more professionals who are the main coordinators of the IEP, but the student is invited to look into his IEPs, to comment, to use some tools that could be provided through the IEP, through the virtual environment of the IEP.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
And how is this helping students? What have you seen the outcome of this software doing for people?
Well, first of all, the collaboration between the different people who are involved in this process, and then the ability to really have smart goals. I know that in many fields we talk about smart goals and how do we determine smart goals, how do you formulate the smart goals, and that was another struggle that we had, where we thought we had the recipe, and at one point we're like, no, this is how we should be. So now we designed it in our software, and we help our professionals either choose from a bank, or the AI will recommend certain goals, but they also have the possibility to create their own smart goals with the formula that we're giving them on the software. So that's very helpful. And it's very helpful for both the students or the professionals, because when they have a SMART goal, it's much clearer what's the end result, what is the outcome. And when it's much clearer, the end result, then it's clearer, it's easier to define what are the means to reach those goals. So
let's bring it to life for our listeners, for our audience.
Yes.
Describe a student, describe what that student might be struggling with, and describe now how they're going to go and build that plan, how they work through that plan, and then what the outcome is for that student.
Sure. So basically, the way it works, if the student has a certain challenge, right, there's a team that's going to...
And what kind of challenge? Can you give some examples of the types of challenges students might have?
So any disability, the student can have dyslexia, dyspraxia, they can have autism, ADHD. It doesn't really matter. Any kind of challenges, and I rather say challenges and not difficulties or disabilities, but any kind of challenges means that you have a challenge, there's a need, and we have to respond to that need. So we're going to put together a certain plan, but the plan is going to be designed according to your challenges, according to your specific needs, because you may have the same diagnosis. You may have two students that have ADHD or that have cognitive limitations, but they all have different needs. They might have similar needs and needs in common, but there are also different. So according to them personally, what are their specific challenges and what are the levels of performance right now today, then we're going to base the goals according to that. So the way it goes is usually the team is going to meet and they discuss about the needs and what are the prior needs they're going to try to satisfy. And then they decide the goals. But here on the software, what's going to happen is that according to the profile that they're going to enter those needs and those level of performance, the AI is going to recommend goals and say, hey, these are the top 10 goals, for example, that we usually provide, and they can choose from those top 10 goals, or they can go and just explore and say, hey, I know I need a goal in the area, maybe in the social emotional skills, or maybe in reading skills, and then they could just click on that goal bank. And then once they get into that goal bank, then they have subcategories, because it's very broad to say I need something in social skills or something in reading skills, but is it fluency? Is it decoding? Is it this? And then they have a subcategory. They have different filters. They choose, they personalize, they add their criteria. The goal is set, and then the software is going to prompt them to say, okay, now what are the means? What are the interventions? What are the tools that you're going to use or that you're suggesting? And they could also say, well, who's in charge of that intervention? Because some things are done from the student will do. Some other things, maybe the parent is involved, maybe the teacher is involved, maybe there's a speech therapist involved. So they can tag who is responsible of the different interventions or tools that we have to put, or all these different conditions that we have to put together to try to reach those goals.
Why do women still feel that they need 100% of the qualifications required to apply for a job when men apply for these same positions with only 60%? What does ambition mean today for women, and how has that evolved in the workforce over time? Here at Women Talk Tech, we've been thinking a lot about the idea of ambition, and we want to hear from you. That's why we've launched the Women Talk Tech Ambition Survey, to understand how ambition factors into the progression of women in the workforce. So, what does ambition mean to you? Take the anonymous survey now and let us know. Find the survey link in the show notes below or on the Women Talk Tech LinkedIn page.
So really what the software is doing is automating a process that would have been manual before and might have lacked collaboration, because you would have been, in the past, somebody would have been responsible for developing that plan. Then they would have been passing it back and forth. And now there's a common place to go in and develop it. And you are able to use the benefits of AI to help prompt what the plan should be. Is that
Yes.
sort of the idea?
Yes.
So-
Prompt and help, and also the feedback, because we also have a way to review the plan. And when you review, you have to really say, okay, how's the progress? Where is it going? And
Right.
get proper feedback to have a better indication on the progress of this progress, actually.
Right. So are we seeing better outcomes then as a result of this? Are we getting some better outcomes with that particular student's individual learning?
So we definitely, that's another thing we do also, is that we continue our research. Our goal was not just to provide the product, but we want to see what are the outcomes. And the outcomes are different types of outcomes. So first of all, we want to see how efficient the software is. Is it really saving time? And it's time. We don't want time and something not efficient. We want it efficient and saving time at the same time. So that's what one thing that's important. The other thing is that it really responds to the needs of every professional. So that's another thing that we look into. And the outcome, the impact that it has also on the professional, we see now that the professionals are spending more time on their software, because sometimes in different areas, different schools, we would see the time that they spent before they went on the software, and the time that they would go back to review their plan. But now, because it's so interactive, they're more motivated to go back into the plan. So they're more on top of what's going on with the student and see how they can really coordinate and implement, because sometimes it's challenging also to implement this in the classroom and so on. So that's one of the outcomes. The other outcomes is what are the impacts on the student. And obviously for the student, we see more involvement and also the progress. Because it's so clear and we have those SMART goals and the means are attributed to the students, there's more engagement, more involvement, and this brings more, up to now with all the data that we've been working with, we could see that the majority of the students, 75% of the goals are reached. There's always some goals that are not reached, depending on the time frame but we're very satisfied to see what's happening at this point.
So, I think for our listeners today, I think everyone in their life knows someone who is struggling with um, challenges, as you've put it, whether it's around dyslexia, learning abilities, lots of different things. I don't know the exact stats offhand, but my understanding is that this is growing in people and particularly in young people. So I think the need for this has never been greater. And I'm curious what your long-term goals are with this, because it sounds like this is something that every educator or team who's helping put a plan together for a student could use. So what's your future for this? And what's your vision for the future?
Well, our vision really is to change practices, right? We want them to have best practice. So the software, I understand that it's a tool, but at the same time, it's a tool that's kind of supporting the different professionals, whether you're a teacher or a speech therapist, to implement better practices, a better process to do your plan. So that's really our vision, is to transform, and not just in with IEPs. There's transition plans. We're very concerned, and we're working on a model for students that have cognitive limitations and that they're doing a transition post secondary school, and they have to find a job, and they're more on functional skills or living skills. So that is one of our concerns, because we want them to really integrate society. And I know that everybody has this intention. We want these people to participate, but the reality is how do we make this happen? So all this is supposed to go through transition planning. So that's one other thing that we're working on. And I think it's going, and again, it's the same goal here, is transform the way, the process, the practices that we're using or we're implementing. And then we have it in different fields. Like I said, now we were very focused in education. However, in health, we have psychologists, neuropsychologists, and if I get more into the medical field, so right now we were actually these past 2 years working with, collaborating with a team that do treatment plans for the elderlies, right? Elderlies, when they go into rehab and they have a certain medical condition or they went through a certain surgery. Obviously, the targets is very different than what you're going to do in a school setting, but the process of how to plan this treatment plan and who's in charge, who's putting these conditions. Sometimes there's caregivers, sometimes there's family members who's involved for an elderly person. So the vision is to take this process that we created, we have a kind of a core product, and implement it with different kinds of situation or clienteles that will have to deal with having an intervention or a program or a treatment plan and using our process.
So one thing that I know our listeners are always keen to hear, they'd love to hear your backstory. How did you decide to get into this? Why did you decide to start doing this?
I really believe that sometimes I'm wondering, oh no, I know or I believe, but no, I do believe that my own challenges. I have a very rare syndrome called Klippel-Trenaunay syndrome. That's shortened to KTS, which is a malformation in veins, soft tissues in one leg. My whole right side, lower down, is very challenged physically, emotionally, and I grew up with this. It's very rare. There's no cure, so you have to kind of figure out what can you do to try to help yourself. So when you're, I guess, caught up in this kind of situation early on, you have to figure out how to still have your own goals in life and figure out what are the means that you're going to use right? Because we're in a system and sometimes we think there's only one way, but it doesn't work that way. So I strongly believe that really shaped me very much, because I see that there's a connection, and that makes me more sensitive, right, to people that have different challenges, and especially if they're vulnerable and they don't have this opportunity to be more, I don't know, supported maybe by their environment, or maybe they don't fall on the right people. And so I'm very sensitive to that. And that's what brought me really in that field. So at one point, when I was younger, I went into a psychology program and I said, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go into psychology where I can help people to overcome whatever challenges, because really it doesn't matter what you have. We all have challenges. Mm-hmm. And it's, what did I learn from my challenges? Like, what are the generic things that people can apply in their lives? So that's how I all started my journey. My professional journey starts from there. And like I said, little by little, as I was helping different people, whether it was social, emotional challenges, or then it became more learning challenges in schools. That's when I said, okay, I have to go to the next step, not just help people one-on-one, but maybe help others that are helping people and give them maybe some other tools if I think that we can find other tools, and so on.
All right. Well, that is wonderful. And I'm glad you did. You're making a big difference, I think, in the world of education, particularly for people who need to look at different paths. As you said in the beginning, everybody has a different path and we need to support that. So I'm really grateful for the work you're doing. And I hope you keep it up. It sounds like it's going to be a journey for you as well. And I think that's fantastic.
It is a big journey. I think for everybody who starts new projects and text projects, it's very challenging, and I hope also for myself. I mean, when you say I hope, I feel like I'm in the same boat, because we're all human, and sometimes when it becomes too challenging, you get a little bit discouraged. But that's what happens when you try to innovate, and especially these new innovations with AI. A roller coaster, and we cross our fingers and we hope that it will continue. Because our goal, like I said, is to make a change, really.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I've been speaking with Nathalie Myara. She's the CEO and co-founder of Eduplan Solutions, and is doing some really incredible work in the province of Quebec right now, but I know it's work that's going to have broad implications throughout North America, and I encourage you to check out Eduplan. You've been listening to another episode of Women Talk Tech. I'm your host, Marie Wiese, and as always, thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me.